happy to greet you at another webinar of TranslAcademy project. And before we start to introducing our today's guest, I want to give you a few words about housekeeping issues. As we announced, our webinar is simultaneously interpreted from English to Russian and vice versa. And in the lower part of the screen, you can see the menu, Your Language. It's a drop-down menu. And if you click there, you can choose the channel with the right tongue. Уважаемые коллеги, если вы предпочитаете услышать меня на английском, пожалуйста, нажмите меню Your Language и вы перейдете на него. This time we have an unusual guest, and that is even more interesting for us. We are going to focus not on another academic school of interpretation and translation. Today we're going to talk with the founder of the project, who has been filling in the gaps in the training of the interpreters of European schools. Today, our speaker is Lucinda Brooks, Managing Director of eCPD Webinars, and I'm going to give the floor now to Alexeyeva, and she will tell you more about our today's guest and our project. I'm greeting everyone at our webinar, and I am happy that we are going on with these webinars, and the ideology of the project is still the same. And I want to remind you that we wanted with Alexander to introduce here at webinars various ways of teaching interpretation and translation. Not all of them are comprehensive ways that start from scratch and give complete results, but maybe some methodological details of different versions of training, because the entire experience of training interpreters and translators shows us that there are various ways of reaching the goal, and we would like you, our participants of the webinar, have an idea of different schools and different ways. So today we are greeting Lucinda Brooks. She is a managing director of the company, and she's going to introduce herself. But what is the most interesting about it, it's not a university, not an academic program, but it's a platform. It's a facility that helps the interpreters and translators. Today the webinar is interpreted by Karina Timofeeva and Vadim Yermolenko. I think you all know Vadim Yermolenko. He's been here for several webinars with us. He is an interpreter with 14 years worth of experience. He is a translator and interpreter with 2 mother tongues, Russian and Ukrainian, and 2 foreign tongues, French and English, and several passive languages. Karina Timofeeva is an interpreter with long experience, and her main working languages are English and Spanish, and several more languages. And these interpreters are alumni of St. Petersburg School of Interpretation and Translation, of which I am a director. And I'm giving the floor to my Ukrainian colleague, Alexander Bondarenko, and he's going to tell us in more detail about the technology of the project. Thank you, Irina Sergeyevna. And we are going to repeat ourselves because we already told that at previous webinars, but we can see new guests here, and especially for this project, we developed a list of questions, which, as we hope, will help us to demonstrate the comprehensively different aspects of training interpreters of the schools that participate here in webinars. In the second part of the webinar, our colleague Lucinda Brooks is going to give you detailed answers to the questions that you can pose in the chat. Right now, you can see the chat window in the lower right corner of the window. And we're going to voice all the questions that you put there. And we'd like to thank VoiceBoxer.fm, and we want to thank them for the possibility to use their software And we would like to remind you that it's one of the very few platforms that give you a chance of simultaneous interpretation during the webinars. And now I'm giving the floor to our guest, to Lucinda Brooks. Lucinda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Irena and Alex, and indeed to the interpreters. This is a first for me. I've never been simultaneously interpreted before, and I'm finding the process very smooth. So thank you, everybody. So as you can see, my name is Lucy Brooks, and the introduction told you that I am the Managing Director of eCPD Webinars, and I'm going to give you a very short presentation, about 10 minutes, I suppose, after which I will be answering the questions that you put, some of which I already know, some of which I don't. So I want to start by saying what we are not. Who or what is eCPD Webinars? Well, the first thing, as Alex has explained, Alex and Irena have both explained, we are not a university. We don't presume to teach translators how to translate. That is not our job. Most translators learn their craft, i.e. translation rather than just language skills, by doing an MA in translation. Having said that, some translators do arrive in the profession via a different route. And we do offer a few presentations on things that you might learn at university, for example, translation techniques. We have a couple of translation workshops on our e-library, and we also have done some presentations on CAT tools. So that's the sort of thing that you might do in an MA course. But most of our presentations are aimed at providing continuing professional development throughout a translation career. The next thing that we are not is a corporate training organization, a big business organization which trains its own employees in best practice for their particular organization. We're certainly not that. And nor are we a professional institute. Professional institutes exist to promote the profession and the standards of its members. As such, we work closely with them, especially the CIOL in London. You may have noticed that I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Linguists, and a fellow means someone who's made a contribution to the institute. But eCPD does not seek to emulate their work in supporting the profession, although we do offer quite a lot of support to translators. More about that later. So that's what we are not. This is what we are. We are, in fact, three ladies. We're one small but very global private company, what you might call in English language a micro business. We're all practicing translators, but some years ago I identified a need for providing online training for translators. We like to give information to translators, background information if you like, on specialist subjects, on how to run a business, on the new and the developing tools that come into existence for translators and interpreters, on how to enter a specialist area, and indeed on just how to write better, obviously in English because we're based in England. So I said we're a global business. Just how global are we? This is a screenshot of the cities in which many of the people who read our newsletter, which goes out a couple of times a month, are based. And you can see that obviously most of them are in Europe, up here. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but Europe, Western Europe. But there's an awful lot of people in cities throughout the US, cities throughout the South America, in Australia, and dotted all over Asia and in Africa too. So really we are represented in more or less every country in the world. The only problem that we have with being global is just the time zones, because obviously people in New Zealand would find it difficult to attend a live webinar. But I'll tell you more about that later. So why did I start eCPD webinars? Well, we identified a gap between MA teaching and real life. The real life of actually starting a business, going out there, finding clients and earning enough money to live. We found that many translators also felt isolated and unable to find the guidance that they needed. Certainly when I began as a freelance translator many years ago, so many I won't mention, there wasn't even the internet, but I felt very, very isolated, and one of our aims is to close that isolation. We also found that many people cannot attend face-to-face training in a major city. There are many reasons for that. They could have children who cannot be left. They could have elderly relatives or a sick relative who cannot be left. It could simply be a matter of distance. It's too far to go. And of course the cost. If you have to travel a long way, you have to pay accommodation, you have to pay the travel, in addition to actually paying for the event itself. And we found that translators like bite-sized training. By bite-sized, I mean easy to digest training on specialist subjects, yet with more to learn after the actual event is over. A couple of years ago, we did a survey of MA graduates to ask them how they felt their MA program fitted them for freelance work. And you can see the graph of the results here. In the past, most language graduates went on to work in-house somewhere, in an agency or a big corporation. But more and more, these businesses are downsizing their departments and relying on freelancers. So many MA graduates go straight to freelance translating, but they don't really know where to start. And their university, except in a few cases, hasn't really helped. You can see here the green, it means that they got no training whatsoever. The red means they didn't get very much, just a couple of hours, and it was probably optional anyway. And one or two universities obviously do take it seriously and offer it a lot. I think the situation is improving, partly because of the fuss that I and your organisations like mine have made about this lack of training. But certainly when we took this survey, that was the result. So we also asked people how confident they were when they started out as freelancer. And it was very revealing. A huge majority felt unprepared for life outside university, and quite a big slice, that's the green ones, were actually terrified. The tiny ones in purple are the people who felt confident, and they were generally people who had been in business before. But as you can see, the majority there, not at all confident. So that's where eCPD was born. Some of the topics that we run on our online webinars cover things like how to run a business. We give background information on specialist subjects. Some examples here would be wind, water, solar power, the automotive industry, industrial materials, the legal system in other jurisdictions, and in fact, since many of you are Russian speaking, you could well be interested. We did do one on the legal system in Russia and translating between English and Russian. Some of these webinars are set in the future, so obviously haven't happened yet, but every time we run a webinar, we turn it into a video, and 90%, 95% of our webinars go onto the e-library in the form of a video. So we have a huge catalogue now under 10 different categories. So our aim, our mission, if you like, is to provide quality CPD. CPD, in case you don't know, stands for Continuing Professional Development. In America, they just call it Continuing Education, or CE. In Australia, they call it PD, Professional Development. We call it CPD, and that's how we got the name of eCPD webinars, which you can see above me there, eCPD being the E being electronic. So our sole aim is to provide good quality, easy access CPD for practicing translations at any level. We have achieved accreditation by the CIOL in London, the CPD Standards Office, by the Dutch Bureau for Sworn Translators, plus ATA approves all our webinars, and most professional organisations are happy to award CPD points for our webinars as formal CPD. So a typical CPD session is usually between 60 and 90 minutes, and it generally forms a presentation by means of slides. There are one or two exceptions. There might be workshops where we get you to participate a little bit more, but basically you're going to be listening, but you do have a facility, usually at the end, to ask questions. There's always a follow-up with handouts, and by the way, talking of handouts, there is one for this webinar, and there is a list of resources which will be coming to you later. And also there's a recording of the webinar, and one of the joys of the recording is that you can watch it as many times as you like, which of course with a face-to-face event, you get one chance only. You get a completion certificate, and our webinars are targeted at different levels of experience. So someone starting out from university at the start of a career is not quite the same as someone starting out in a new specialist area. So newcomers need to get established. They need to get their business organized, and they need to get clients and get experience. But when you're ready and you want to branch into a new specialist area, that's the time to subscribe to some of our videos in different fields, to see if you want to develop them into a specialism, perhaps nuclear energy or geology, wind energy, automotive, whatever it might be. So why is CPD important? Okay, we've qualified, we've got our degree, we've got our MA, and we know how to translate, yes indeed. But with CPD, we do need to keep on top of technology as it develops. I think I mentioned to you, I became a translator quite a long time ago, and the technology has developed massively in that time, and of course I needed to keep up with it. We also need to keep up with translation industry issues, and we need to tackle our own personal work issues, identify weak areas that we know we're not quite so good at, areas that we'd like to develop into, but we don't really know how. Of course, we also need to keep up with our own target language as things change. Slang, marketing, business, they all have their own languages, and you have to keep up with the new terminology in specific areas, and of course in the various technical areas that you might be working in. Not only the target language, but we need to keep up our source language skills, and also we have to understand what our customers are wanting and what they're needing, and find them and retain them. I'm often asked how I find speakers. I have to say it's not an easy job. I'm constantly on the lookout for potential speakers. First, I have to decide on a subject. This could be suggested by our audience, or maybe it's something I have in my head that I want to produce. And then I set about finding a speaker, and that's the hardest part. They need to be an expert in their subject, but they also need to understand what translators want and what they need. It can happen that somebody I think is ideal does not like the medium or hasn't got the time, especially if they come from outside the translation industry. I do try to find experts in various fields, for example, doctors, health professionals, industry experts who are not translators, but I have to brief them about what translators want. When I say translators, by the way, I'm very aware, I'm not saying interpreters, but please feel included. If you're an interpreter, feel included in this, because it's the same. Our webinars are aimed at both sides. These people will talk about their industry and open the eyes of the translator/interpreter audience to the background of the fields that they work in. I mentioned earlier the automotive webinar that we did about a month ago, and the person you can see on the slide, top right-hand corner, gave an absolutely fantastic webinar last year on the oil and gas exploration industry. And all those people that you see there have given us webinars, and dozens more. So the best thing about eCPD webinars is that they are bite-sized, i.e. short. They are affordable. Most of them offer further self-study, so you can take the subject on if you wish. They're available on demand, and the recording can be played over and over. Having said that they're available on demand, we do like people to come to the live webinars as well, but if they can't, obviously they can watch it as a recording. We offer quite a few free resources. We have a newsletter. We have quite a few free materials on our website. You'll have the link later. On how to start a new business, how to start a translation business. And then we also have specialist mailing lists with tips and links. And we also publish a manifesto and a badge which you can use for your own website. And I'd like to invite everybody here to our Kickoff webinar in September, which we're starting the new term with. It's on the 13th of September at 2 p.m. UK time. So I think for most of you that will be 4 o'clock. And we will be just showcasing what we're going to be doing next autumn, and we have a very full program. So I finished my little presentation. Thank you very much for listening. And as a thank you, we at eCPD Webinars would like to offer you a discount just for a month until the 25th of June on a webinar set in the future or a video from the e-library. I'm afraid it does not apply to courses, but to single webinars or to videos. And the code is on the resource list, and if you're a lecturer, you may pass this discount on to your students. So thank you very much. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Lucinda, for your insightful presentation. And I have the first question, which is very logical to it. Can you please, very briefly, very shortly, define the principal aim of your learning platform? What it is mission, what is new about it, what is unique about it?
Yeah, our aim, as I've said in the presentation, is to provide good CPD for practicing translators. What is unique about it, I think, is that it is not, we do not try to be a university, we do not try to be a training organization in any way. We are simply a platform where people can pick and choose what they want to learn and carry it out as they wish, either by attending a live webinar or watching a video on demand. And also we provide a platform for our customers, if you like. We have a Facebook page, we have a LinkedIn group, we have all sorts of support materials to help people who follow our webinars further their careers. That is our sole aim.
Thank you, Lucinda, for your answer. And the next question is about the history of your learning platform. You have already mentioned some aspects of it, but please say some milestones of your history.
Okay, yes, back to me. I think the question was, could I describe the milestones? Our company, my company, started in 2010. It started as a commercial organization but in fact, the year before, in 2009, I was working with the Chartered Institute of Linguists in London, arranging face-to-face CPD events, workshops and presentations by eminent linguists or translators. After that 1 year working with the CIOL, it was clear that it was very popular, it was going to be very popular, and that as a volunteer, which is what I was, unpaid, I could not carry on at the momentum that I was. So eCPD was born and became a commercial organization. I started it with 2 colleagues in the UK. Unfortunately, tragedy struck, and one of my partners actually died very suddenly. He had cancer, and he didn't really ever take part. He was too ill. And that changed the dynamic of our company. And the other partner decided that she couldn't work with just the way we were after the death of our partner. So I started to work with a close colleague in Australia. I say close colleague, obviously Australia's a long, long way away, but she's a very close colleague and we worked very well like that. She was covering that side of the world and I was covering our side of the world. But then later on, Maya Figueroa, whose picture you saw earlier, she joined me in 2012. She's based in Barcelona. And then in 2015, Marta Stelmaszak, many of you may know that name. She's a Polish English translator. And she joined us in 2015 to modernize the website. I think the achievement that I'm most proud of is obtaining accreditation from the CIOL and the CPD Standards Board in the UK, because that was quite a hard task. We had to go through many accreditation procedures, and in English we say hoops. We jumped through many hoops. But basically what it means now is that you can trust us to produce only good quality material and that we won't produce dross or rubbish. And I'm afraid there is a lot of that about on the internet these days. So if you book an eCPD webinar, you know it will be good and that we will have put 100% into identifying the best speaker for the topic.
Спасибо. Thank you very much. Please could you tell us more about how you identify and select your speaker?
Yeah, well, I went into it during my little presentation. I'm always on the lookout for potential speakers, and in fact, I use the contacts that I have, and I do have quite a few, relentlessly. And I have to sometimes chase people 2 or 3 times to explain what we do. It is hard, I have to say. Obviously, within the industry, there are, that is to say, the translation and interpreting industry, there are many eminent people. I can't say I know them all, but I know many of them, and I often ask them to present a webinar. But what I really like is to go outside the industry and get a speaker who is not actually a translator or an interpreter themselves, but who can give us really good background on an industry or sector. So that's really where I concentrate my efforts. And as I said, the autumn program I have set up, I'm quite proud of. Just take a look at the website and you'll see what we have set up for this autumn. Over to you.
The next question, Irina Sergeyeva, I will give the floor to you. Thank you, Lucinda. Thank you, Alexander. Could you please tell me about the benefits of your learning platform?
I think the main benefit is that it's bite-sized. In other words, it doesn't take much time. You don't have to enroll on a course that's going to take 6 months or 3 months or 4 years or whatever. You can actually learn quite a lot in an hour, which is the average length of our webinars, an hour to an hour and a half. But there is always the opportunity of learning more and more and more. But you get the key to that door to learn more and more and more. So it doesn't take up too much time, nor does it take up too much money, because we're very aware that translators are traditionally not very well paid. Well, some of them are, but most people, watch the pennies. And so we keep our prices reasonable, but we still do need to charge a price, obviously, because there are expenses in maintaining this platform. And of course, we have to pay our speakers as well. They don't do it for nothing. So I think that's probably the best and probably most unique thing about eCPD webinars.
Okay, the next question, Lucinda. Since I'm a translator and interpreter myself, I'm very interested to know which representatives of the industry do you collaborate with? Probably not only linguists.
Well, I can give you some examples. If I go back to the picture of all my experts, well, it's not all of them. There is the a little snapshot of some of the people with whom I have worked. On the top right-hand corner, you see Dr. Ivan Vasconcelos, who is an expert in oil and gas exploration. I think I mentioned that earlier. On the far left, you see Sim Harris, who is an expert on railways, and he gave us a wonderful two-part webinar on the rail system in the United Kingdom. Not illustrated there is Dr. Karen Katchik, who is a chemist and also a science translator, pharmaceuticals. She concentrates on medical chemistry, pharmaceuticals, and cosmetics, I think she does too. Dr. Ed Zanders, now he's there somewhere, bottom line, third from the right, that's Dr. Ed Zanders. He has presented a series of webinars on chemistry, the pharmaceuticals industry, and other related subjects. The person on the bottom right is Andrew Lee. He is a lawyer, British lawyer, and he has given us not only some very good terms and conditions for translators, he's also presented 2 webinars on translating for the EU, legal text for the EU. Who else do we have? Dr. Pablo Muguerza, not illustrated. He's a doctor based in Spain. He's done a number of medical webinars for us. Jason Willis-Lee, again, a medically qualified interpreter and translator. Alison Hughes, illustrated there in black and white in the middle row. She works in the creative industry, she's a translator in the creative industries, and full of expertise and tips. And also many of my sources come from the world of journalism. In fact, Sim, who I pointed out on the left-hand side, he's a journalist. He edits a railway magazine. And again, not illustrated, we have Justin Cunningham, who edits Industrial Materials and Eureka magazine in the UK. Similarly, Christopher Barnett, who edits, he was a university lecturer, but he's now an editor and writer. And he has given 2 wonderful, or he's given 1 webinar so far on 3D printing, and he's due to give another one in December on artificial intelligence. And I can tell you now that he is an amazingly engaging speaker. Over to you.
Lucinda, another question to you. Yes, we understand that you like what you are doing. Am I right? And is there anything that you would like to change at your platform? Maybe improve, streamline, or remove? Is there any necessity for any changes, and what would you change? Yeah.
Well, in answer to your first question, yes, I love what I do. I think and I sleep and I eat eCPD webinars. Although, having said that, I am also still a practicing translator. Not very many clients now, because obviously this takes up a lot of my time, but I do continue to translate. What would I like to change? Well, the thing is that being small, we do not have the sophisticated payment platforms and booking platforms that perhaps some larger organizations have. I would very much like to be able to streamline everything so that it all is more automated. We're fairly, hands-on. We have to do quite a lot of manual processing of bookings. So that would be good, because then I can concentrate more time on producing good webinars and getting the word out to practicing translators, because I would really like to be able to welcome more practicing translators to eCPD. Over to you.
It's not secret, Lucinda, that globally the youth have a trend to have worse knowledge of their mother tongue. Could you please advise us how your participants improve their mother tongue skills?
You are so right. Writing, as a translator, as translators, we should know how to write, but many fall into writing traps. Obviously, we're based in the UK, so we're very much UK oriented in this respect, but we do have several courses and webinars on writing style. For example, Karen Katchik, Dr. Karen Katchik, I mentioned her earlier. She has a webinar on technical writing for English translator or translators into English. We have webinars on revision and editing. We have a course actually starting week after next on clear writing, again English, and copywriting, again in English. And interestingly, I was at a conference at the weekend, and a lady from France, representing the French professional organization, came to me and said she would really like to run a course on clear writing in French. Now that's more difficult for me to do because obviously I don't have the same contacts in France or in Germany or in Russia or Ukraine as I do here. And it would be quite difficult for me to put that on, but by collaborating with other institutes, other organizations, I think we could probably extend the scope of native language proficiency courses to other languages too.
Well, our mandatory questions have been answered too. Thank you very much, Lucinda. And now we are going to look into the questions from the participants of the webinar. And I have the following question. I'm interested in it as well. It's from Catherine. Which specialized areas are most popular in higher demand, and which ones do you think will be in higher demands over the years? As a translator, you have some strategic view of these matters.
Interesting question. I try to keep a balance in our categories: legal, financial, medical, technical. But by far the most popular webinars are those that concentrate on the creative writing or creative industries. Translating in the creative industries, transcreation, which in case you don't know is writing for advertising, changing copy, not actually translating, but also copywriting. So those kind of events are always very, very, very popular. And there was one earlier this year, it was earlier this year, which was extremely popular, and that was translating for the international development sector. It was surprisingly popular because when I put it on, I really didn't think we'd have more than a few attending, and it was very, very popular indeed. So that was, a good one. But we don't use popularity as the measure of what we put on, because I feel very strongly that we need to cover those sort of 5 principal areas: medical, legal, financial, creative, editing, style, that kind of thing, equally. So, I just put on what I feel needs to be put on and then just see what happens. But the answer to the question is definitely creative. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Lucinda, for your answer. And we have another question. Do the attendees continue communication with the speaker of the webinar? Are they provided with any feedback, any tests, any handouts? It's a very interesting question.
Yes, handouts are always given, even if it's only the slides they've just seen. But often there's extra material besides the slides they've just seen, and they have an email address with which they can communicate to the with the speaker. In the rare occasions where the speaker prefers not to be communicated with, people can communicate through me and I pass them on. So there's always follow-up. We do have feedback forms. As people exit from a webinar, they can fill in their feedback and tell us what they thought. I always monitor those, and if I find somebody is a bit unhappy, doesn't happen very often, but if someone is a bit unhappy, I will contact them and find out why and what the problem was, and pass it on to the speaker so that next time they can make it better. And as I said earlier, generally we provide further reading. Besides what they've seen on the webinar, there are books, there are articles, there are blogs, there are courses, there are all sorts of things you can do to build on what you've learned. The idea of the short webinar is to get a taste to see if that's an area you want to specialize in. Obviously you can't specialize in an hour, but if you think it's going to be good for you, you can read more and find out more and practice, practice, practice.
Thank you very much, Lucinda, for your answer. And now the question from Olga. Lucinda, is there a picture, so to say, of your attendee, specialization, country?
Interesting question, Olga. I think probably the word is avatar. In marketing speak, we talk about an avatar, which is your sort of typical customer. And yes, our typical customer, I would say, is a translator, usually female, in her 30s or so, and has probably been translating for between 5 to 8 years, and is looking to expand the career. Established already, but wanting to do better, earn more money, develop into different areas. So I would say that is our typical customer. But having said that, of course, we have many others at either end. We have people starting out. We have people who've been around for a very long time. I won't mention names, but probably the most experienced translator I know regularly attends our courses, even though I'm sure there's not much she can learn, but she says there's always something. If you come away with one thing, then you've learned something. So, you know, even if you're experienced, you will find something in every one of our webinars. Over to you.
The next question, it's rather interesting. It's from an interpreter. The question is as follows. Do you plan to have courses for interpreters, and is it possible to teach interpretation online in a remote mode through your webinars? Is it?
Yeah, interesting. We've never tried to teach how to interpret. As I said about translators, we don't try to teach you your trade. That is what you do at university. We do have some courses for interpreters, but they're not teaching you how to interpret, or they're not giving you practice. I think there are MA courses that do it remotely, but it's not what we do. However, this autumn, we have a very nice little course for interpreters about using your tablet, your iPad or your Android or whatever tablet it is, to help you in your task as an interpreter, taking notes, for example, apps, dictionaries, all sorts of things. I'm not an interpreter myself, so I can't talk too much in detail, but it's being run by two very highly respected interpreters working for the EU. One is Alex Drexel and the other is Josh, and I've forgotten his surname, but Josh. He's very well known, extremely well known. And that starts in September, I think, and that will be a great course. And there was one that's on the eLibrary, which is a series we called Work Right. It consisted of four different webinars. Prepare Right, Practice Right, work right, and eat right. So 4 sort of steps that you can take as an interpreter to be ready for that assignment. And the Prepare Right webinar actually resulted in a Facebook group being set up by the speaker, Jonathan Downey, Dr. Jonathan Downey, which is still running. And in fact, if you're interested, I'll give you the link because you can ask to join if you're an interpreter. And it shares tips on preparation practice for interpreters. So I'll follow that up afterwards if anyone's interested. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I have another question. Did it happen that one of your webinars was a failure? And what was the reason of it, if it's not a secret?
Did you say failure? Okay, I'll assume that that's what was one of have we ever had a failed webinar? I wouldn't say completely failed, but there have been 1 or 2 that have not been as sparky and excellent as others. Very few. I can count them on one hand. And we tend not to put those on the e-library if we do have a bad one. Where I do remember one long time ago. It was right in the first year. We had a chap on to talk. He's a brilliant guy, absolutely fantastic man, and he knows everything there is to know about working on a computer. And of course, we all work on computers, and it was, you know, Windows problems and all that sort of thing. And as I say, he was fantastic, but during the webinar, he completely dried and could not say one word. And so we actually had to stop the webinar and give everybody their money back, which was, I can laugh now, it was about 6 years ago. It wasn't very funny then. And of course, you know, that webinar never happened, and the poor chap was mortified. But I think that's probably the worst failure we've ever had, and I admit it freely.
I have another question for you from Evgenia Zimina. Well, I'm sure that Evgenia is a teacher herself because she asks, do you have any webinars on methodology of training in translation and interpretation? As far as I understand, Lucinda, you have already mentioned a webinar by Jonathan Downey, but probably you could tell us about webinars on methodology.
No, we have nothing on our program on methodology. As I said, we don't try to teach people how to do their trade, how to do their profession. However, as I said, we're very small and we're very personal, and I'm always happy to talk to somebody, you know, perhaps to give such a webinar, to give such a course, which, if you think it would be of interest, I'd be very, very happy to talk to somebody you think might be able to help in that area. But no, right now we have no such offering on our program. Over to you.
Thank you, Lucinda. I have one question that I was eager to ask you. Okay, so you provide handout materials to your attendees. What about copyright? How do you pass it, or there is no copyright for your materials?
Oh yeah, that's copyright. The copyright belongs to the speaker in all cases. So obviously there's no permission to pass it on. Only attendees get the handouts. They're all labelled very clearly that they are copyright material. We're all professional people, and I would never pass on editable files to attendees. So the copyright belongs to the speaker in all cases, although having said that, we do have the right to obviously market the webinars on the eLibrary, but that's as far as it goes.
Another question for you. Do you invite speakers from universities? I don't know about the situation in the UK, but traditionally in our country, one of the main problems is that many of the university teachers are not practicing translators or interpreters. So I have two questions. Is it a case in the UK, and do you invite any university trainers? And if so, which?
Yes, we do. A number of my speakers are university lecturers. Very often they are what I would call visiting lecturers rather than the actual academics, although they're academics themselves. So I do prefer to have a university teacher, lecturer, who is also a practicing translator stroke interpreter. For example, a lovely lady called Adriana Tortoriello gave us a webinar on subtitling. She lectures at Westminster University. Another lady, Lindsay Bywood, is also at Westminster University. She does audiovisual translation. And coming up in a couple of weeks, we have a lady who is a guest. She's actually assistant professor in Taiwan at Taiwan University, and she is giving a webinar on the advancement of technology in patent translation. So yes, if I meet an academic and I hear them speak and I like the way they speak, I will invite them. I do go to presentations quite often at a local university where I meet academics from all over, not just this country, and I try to get them involved and interested. And in fact, Yvonne Tsai, who is going to do the patents webinar, is one such. I met her at a university event last year, and she's going to do this webinar for us soon. Over to you.
Lucinda, a question from Evgeny. Please, can you please tell me how deep is, we'll say, the immersion of your attendees into this specialized area, and who
I didn't hear the last part of that question. So I think you said, how deep is the immersion of attendees into the area, the specialist area? That is something I cannot control, mainly because I am not in the classroom with them. They are at the other end of their computer, they're in another room. So I assume that if they have purchased a seat on one of our webinars, they are interested and they will attend the webinar and they will concentrate on the webinar and they will consider it afterwards. In fact, I know they do because they send us feedback afterwards, and that they will reflect on what they've learned and they will consider where they want to take their learning to the next level, and then plan their CPD. We do offer a kind of plan that you can work on to plan your CPD. So, for example, let's say a translator decides that they've been generalist for too long and they want to start being a technical translator, and they are actually quite interested in the wind energy sector. So they're going to start reading about it, they're going to start researching a little bit and attend one of our webinars, which will offer them more information about the wind energy sector, how to find out more, give you some authoritative background to give you the confidence to go out to the clients in that area and say, hey, I can do this. Or maybe it could be that an agency sends you a job and it's an area you're not all that familiar with, but would like to do. So what do? Before you start the job, you search online to see if eCPD's got something on it, and you buy it and you watch it, and then you're happy to do the job. That's the practical world out here. You need to be able to assimilate the skills to do the job in hand.
I have a question myself. I would like to ask you, how do you research your market? How do you find those gaps that you are filling in with your webinars? So probably you talk to experts during the conferences, or you have online service for your target audience. So how do you do it?
Well, really, it's the target audience that I carry out the research with, because we are a service and we are trying to provide what they want. We are trying to serve the needs of practicing translators and interpreters who want to further their career. And they come to me and they say, Lucy, could you do a webinar on whatever they want? And if I think it's viable and possible, I will try to do it. I have quite a long list of suggestions for webinars that people have made to me at various times, whether face-to-face, whether at a conference, or whether at one of our Kickoff webinars, because we give you an opportunity to say what you'd like to see. And looking at that list, I'm quite happy that I have addressed most of the topics that people say they'd like to see a webinar on. For example, last September, somebody suggested they'd like to see a webinar on nutrition, because that was an area that they worked in. So what did I do? I found an expert nutritionist and set up a webinar, and it was quite well attended. So, you know, if somebody asks, I do. That's how I try to do it, unless I think it's not at all viable or not at all interesting to anybody except that one person. That's not really something I could do. But if I think it's going to be of interest to more than a few people, then yeah, I'll put it on. So basically, I talk to people is the answer to that question.
Thank you, Lucinda. I have two questions. How long does it take to prepare a webinar? And are there any similar learning platforms providing webinars? And what is your opinion of them?
Okay, so how long does it take to prepare a webinar? It can take many hours, because I have to, obviously, it starts with an idea, and then it's a question of researching speakers. By the time I've found the speaker and agreed, you know, the terms and what we're going to do and the date and so on, several hours, you know, quite a few hours have passed, not all on the same day. It might have taken months. And then as the date of the webinar approaches, obviously the speaker has to prepare their talk. That goes without saying, but I don't get too involved in that. I do look at their slides beforehand. Sometimes I need to proofread, because if they're not native English speaking, you know, the odd typo can creep in. Then before the webinar, about a week before, we have a rehearsal, and we check that the platform's working well, and that the speaker is familiar with the platform and can handle it, show their slides and maybe videos or whatever. And then, of course, the webinar itself, and then I follow up. So altogether, I don't know, if you add up all the hours together, probably a week, but it will take actually months and months sometimes. Having said that, sometimes I can arrange one in just a few days, but normally it takes a long time. And the other question was, are there any similar platforms? There's a multitude of learning platforms out there, but I think dedicated solely to translators and interpreters, there's one or two others. I know of one in Germany, which is operating. There was another, but I'm afraid that it didn't thrive. So there's one in Germany, it's called Academia, and of course they concentrate on the German language market. Otherwise, the platforms that I'm aware of for our market are run by the professional organizations like the SFT in France, like Azitrad in Spain, like the BDU in Germany, the ATA in the USA, and so on. There are dozens and dozens of professional organizations, and each one has its own little program. But one like ours, only the one that I can think of in Germany. Over to you.
I have another question. How much are you dedicated to your audience of translators and interpreters? Having listened to the webinar, I believe that maybe there are non-linguists among our audience who need to fill their gaps for this or that reason. Don't you want to become a generally educating platform for general audience? Do you have any statistics? If there are any other professions?
Yeah, I'm just moving the slides to the last slide so that you can see the code. Okay, so how dedicated are we to linguists as opposed to non-linguists? Actually, I have always said that many of our specialist webinars, the one on 3D printing, for example, artificial intelligence, wind and solar energy, are of great interest to anybody, whether they are a translator, interpreter or not. Although I do kind of skew them a little bit towards interpreters' needs and translators' needs. But in answer to your question is, do I plan to expand it and make it bigger? I think right now, no, I'm not. I'm quite happy with our little niche market. It is small, I have to say, but I have currently no plans to make it any bigger. That is not to say that in the future eCPD webinars would not move ahead in that direction. Over to you.
Alexander, correct me if I'm wrong. There are no more questions, and now we have the closing session, the wrap-up part. Yes, I think it's about time to wrap up, and I'm giving the floor to you. Thank you. I'll be brief. You know, I was very pleased with this opportunity, and I admired Lucinda's platform, and I very liked the idea itself, because many interpreters and translators want these kind of materials, and now they have this opportunity to share their experience. Many people don't even know that they want to share their knowledge, because all of us, all the interpreters and translators, are accumulating knowledge, and this is an opportunity, a chance to pass it on, and there is a possibility of feedback and also an opportunity to earn some money in the process. And I was also interested in the question about the trends for the future. What topics and subjects might be interested in the future? And I was very interested in this creative writing that you mentioned. It should be included in the curriculum, I believe, and it should be taken into account for the translators and interpreters. And so I think that my intuitive feelings about that were the same with what we learned here today. The creativeness is not just to be faithful to the known text, but also to add something to it. It's something new. In the past, translators didn't do that, and I think that it's very useful to get knowledge from professionals. Thank you, Lucinda, very much. Lucinda, and we also have a couple of minutes. Maybe you would like to wrap up something. Maybe you would like to summarize what you were talking about, and I'm giving the floor to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex and Irina. I have enjoyed very much presenting to you all. It's been, as I said at the beginning, a new experience for me. Basically what we're trying to do is not do the same as a university at all. We're not trying to teach people their craft. What we are trying to do is help them expand their careers and continue their careers. If you think that if you leave university with a degree, MA, or whatever it is, and you go into a job, perhaps you're I don't know, you might go into the retail industry. Let's say you go and work for Marks and Spencer's. That's a big department store in this country. You would join probably quite junior. You would come in as a trainee graduate. But after 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, you don't expect to be at that same level, do you? That you joined when you're 23 or 4. You're going to work hard and go up the ladder until you are the CEO. Well, one will. But you want to rise, basically. You want a career path. So why not, if you're a translator and interpreter, why should we not rise up that path as well? You shouldn't always need to be at the same when the day you leave university. You need to rise up, not only your career itself, but your income. You want to earn more as time goes on. So that is really where we step in to try and help people once they have graduated, once they have become that translator, and to help them just keep up with what's going on. It's essential to keep up. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucinda. Thank you, dear colleagues and friends. We thank our colleague, Lucinda Brooks, for a very engaging talk she gave us, and I'm sure that everyone present here learned something new about the profession, and I want to underline again that the dialogue here is not over and it's only starting at this point. We invite you to leave your questions at our website. In the lower part of the website, you can see the Discuss application where you can leave your comments and questions. Also, you can leave your comments in our Facebook group, a Twitter channel, or in the comments to the YouTube video. And your questions will be passed on to our speaker, and she will provide the answers. And the recording of this webinar will be put in our YouTube channel very soon. We will give you the link to all those registered for the webinar, and also we are inviting all the interested schools and platforms to cooperate with us, and we are ready to have as our guests all those who have something to share with their colleagues. And our contact details are on the website, and we are looking forward to your proposals. Thank you very much.